All right, so here we go. We're at Chapter 36, Nationalism and Political Identities in Asia. We're in the Africa under colonial domination subheading, and then we're in the colonial economy subheading underneath that. So what's important to note is that there were two key European economic objectives in Africa. They wanted to make sure that the colonized paid for their institutions. So, basically, they paid for themselves and paid to be put under the thumb of the Europeans themselves. And then the second thing is that they develop export-oriented economies, okay, which is really going to be focused on taking raw materials out of these areas and where they can be put into manufactured good and then be sold in any market around the world and sometimes back to the Africans themselves. This is going to be a big issue since the Great Depression is going to cause a lot of vulnerabilities. And so, especially um, countries which are focused on exports or colonies focused on exports are really going to suffer during this time. One of the things that's going to make this make life difficult within the colonies then and make it in some ways difficult to this day is that there is going to be infrastructure put up, everything for port facilities, railroads, telegraph wires, all of that. But it was done for the European businesses. It was done so that the Europeans are going to get the benefit from it. Okay, so that's going to be big. Another thing when we look at the farming and mining is that the cash crops are going to be created, not only part of that export strategy, but how do you force that? Well, you charge enough taxes on the farmers that they naturally will go into those cash crops and try to do that as much as they can uh, to pay the taxes. One of the things that's going to end up happening as well is we have a whole series of different natural resources which are found: peanuts, cotton, cacao, palm oil, um, also things like rubber and gold and diamonds and so on and so forth. But one of the things that's very interesting about that is that in um, places where there's a lot of white settlers, what's going to end up happening is that the governments are going to make sure that those white settlers have the best farmland, okay, which will obviously create a lot of different issues. The other thing that you'll notice is, like I mentioned before, there's going to be copper, diamonds, gold, so on and so forth. But the way that you are going to get people to work there is going to be basically through um, basically instituting a type of slavery. So what's going to happen is that the colonial officials are going to have to try to find forced labor. And so I thought this quote was particularly telling here. We have stolen their lands, now we must steal his limbs. Compulsory labor is the corollary to the occupation of this country. Okay, and so what's going to happen um, is that Europe, as they've gone in and colonized Africa, they've colonized it for their benefits. And the way that those colonies, life would be better in those colonies is to be able to export things. And then with the Great Depression, that demand for exports is going to go down. And so Africa is going to find themselves in a very difficult point right before we enter into World War II. I'll see you in the next video.